Freddie Mercury once asked one of the most important questions of human civilization. Is this real life, or is this just fantasy? You may be asking what this has to do with Fanta the soft drink, and yes, it actually has nothing to do with it. I just wanted to make a clever Fanta pun and failed terribly. But did you know that one of the most important reasons why we even have Fanta is failure? Yeah. Now, get ready for this completely, factually true statement. Fanta was created in Nazi Germany after the failure of the Coca-Cola plant to continue making Coca-Cola. Wait, am I saying that Fanta is eligible to be canceled by the Twitterati because of Nazi roots? Yes. This is Munchable, and today we'll be looking at how the circumstances of Nazi Germany led to the creation of Fanta. Like most of these stories, the origin of Fanta starts with one man. And no, that one man isn't Adolf Hitler. His name is Max Keith. In the 1930s, Max was a German businessman and was working with Coca-Cola GmbH, the major bottler of Coca-Cola during the Nazi period of German history. Don't let this confuse you. Coca-Cola products aren't usually bottled by Coca-Cola directly. Instead, they are bottled by subsidiary bottling companies that have a concession from Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola GmbH was one of such companies. At the age of 33, Max started working at the company and soon rose to the apex level of management in 1938 after the death of Ray Powers, the American manager. Just before the outbreak of the Second World War, Germany was consuming about 4 million bottles of Coca-Cola per year. This means that the soft drink was a highly beloved drink in the country, and Max was the head of a pretty prosperous company. When Hitler decided to invade Poland on the 1st of September 1939, the Second World War broke out. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and World War II got in full swing. At first, the outbreak of the war didn't affect Max Keith and his work with Coca-Cola. However, Max soon lost contact with the corporate heads of Coca-Cola, and he was left to run the company on his own. After a while, Max was appointed to the Office of Enemy Property. This was done because Max worked with the German bureaucracy, and by doing this, he was able to avoid the nationalization of the company. But why would Max want to avoid the nationalization of the company? That would have been a good thing, right? Well, not really. You see, Coca-Cola GmbH was a subsidiary of a foreign company and thus was eligible for nationalization. Immediately the war broke out, Hitler decided that all foreign and Jewish companies would be sold to German citizens. It was probably one of the first economic directives that Hitler issued after the war began. As Max Keith was a German citizen and not a Jew, it made sense that he would work for the conversion of Coca-Cola GmbH to a Nazi-owned company. But that's where Max was different. He didn't. In fact, as Max Keith was a German citizen and not a Jew, it made sense that he would work for the conversion of Coca-Cola GmbH to a Nazi-owned company. But that's where Max was different. He didn't. In fact, he went to great lengths to make sure the company wasn't nationalized. While he did work with the Nazis, his alliance laid with Coca-Cola. He was going to protect the company with all he had. It's important to note that other CEOs and directors in Keith's position worked to nationalize their companies. They knew that if Hitler was successful, they would be able to take over the company when the war was won. But, like we said before, Max Keith was different, and he went to great lengths to make sure this didn't happen. Of course, he still ran the company, but this was a far better option than turning it over to Nazi control. The war rolled on, and Hitler was being extremely successful in his campaigns. But this wasn't the whole story. The Nazis were forcing some pretty strong setbacks, too. For example, the Allied countries had staged a naval blockade of Germany, and this had a huge effect on the economy of the country. For example, important industries were unable to get their hands on vital raw materials. Coca-Cola GmbH wasn't excluded. Even though the company had stocked up on supplies before the blockade, important raw materials finally diminished in 1941. The company had been unable to get its hands on Coca-Cola syrup due in part to the naval blockade. Another reason for this was the fact that America, the home country of Coca-Cola, had placed an economic embargo on Germany. This meant that even if the ports were open, which they were not, the company would not be able to get Coca-Cola syrup, which was the main ingredient for making Coca-Cola. Thus, Max Keith was faced with a decision. He either had to close down the whole company, turn over the keys to the Nazi government, and go home, or invent a new drink that the company's factories could continue producing in place of Coca-Cola. What do you think he did? Importantly, what would you have done? Quickly, go to the comment section and tell us. If you were Max Keith, what would you have done? Would you have tried to invent a new drink? Or would you have just closed up shop and gone home? Well, Max Keith didn't like going home very much. At least, that's what we presume, because he didn't give up, and he decided to make a new drink to replace Coca-Cola. Do you know how difficult such an undertaking would be? I mean, the original Coca-Cola came to be as a result of years of research and some luck. In fact, we have a video of the particular origins of Coca-Cola here on this channel. Did you know that Coca-Cola was originally meant to be a painkiller? No? Well, now you do. So, where were we? Yes, the original Coca-Cola was difficult to make. How in God's name was Max Keith going to come up with something just as good as Coca-Cola in just a few months? It seemed like an impossibility, especially as he had very little raw materials to choose from. The job Max decided to undertake was impossible, to say the least. He basically wanted to create a new Coca-Cola using only materials found in German territory, and he was going to do it in wartime as well. Max Keith wasn't a scientist. In layman's terms, he was just a manager and a money man. So even if he wanted to, there was no way he could do this on his own. That's why he directed Coca-Cola's chief German chemist, Dr. Schettelig, to do it. He told the doctor to start looking for an alternative to Coca-Cola, and that's when the story of Fanta began. Like Max, Dr. Schettelig faced the same problems. He had to develop a good alternative to Coca-Cola using only ingredients that were readily available in German territory. But you know what they say, when there's a will, there's something fantastic brewing. Wait, they don't say that? Why? They should, really. In any case, the doctor was surprisingly able to come up with something. The fact that a viable alternative could even be made from ingredients found in Germany alone was a shock in itself. But it was done. It seemed impossible, but Dr. Schettelig was able to do it. The alternative drink was made from whey and apple pulp. The idea was simply ingenious. Apples were abundant in Germany, even during the war, and they were essentially a byproduct of quark and cheese production that continued even in the war. The other ingredients of the drink, like beet sugar, were basically byproducts of other production processes going on in Germany. In fact, Max Keith said that the drink was basically made of leftovers of leftovers. That's pretty strong language, wouldn't you say? But it's true. Have you ever seen those machines made of scraps of other machines? The alternative drink that Max and Dr. Schettelig produced was like the beverage version of that. However, the drink was somewhat sweet and had a refreshing, fruity taste. Max Keith suddenly had this solution. This was the drink to replace Coca-Cola, and it would make sure that the company and its factories stayed away from Nazi hands. Now, all this drink needed was a name. If you know your marketing well, you'd know that the name of a drink is probably just as important as the contents of the bottle. A good example of that is probably 7-Up. You don't want to know what horrific name that drink first went by. Wait, do you want to know? Well, we have a video on that too, and you can check it out on the channel. So the drink needed a name, and Max Keith, not one for huge marketing budgets, announced a name competition between the staffs of the company. When the staff asked if he had any idea on what name to give the drink, he told them to use their Fantastisch, which is the German word for fantasy. After hearing this, veteran salesman Joe Nip just blurted out Fanta, and it stuck immediately. The great thing about the name Fanta is that it was immediately understood in other languages. It denoted fun, and Max Keith was 100% certain that it would be successful. The same year, the drink got registered as a German trademark. The drink would be produced throughout the year, and Germans would immediately fall in love with it. In 1943, 3 million bottles of Fanta were sold. However, not all of them were imbibed. German housewives began to use Fanta to flavor soups and stews because of the sugar rationing that the war had caused. The point is, Fanta got so popular in Germany that it almost became the signature drink of the country. That's why a lot of people say that Fanta was created by Nazi Germany. But that's incorrect. The drink was produced in Nazi Germany and grew so popular that it almost became the official drink of the regime. Let's just say Adolf Hitler probably had a taste. Yes, it was that popular. Now, this isn't because the taste of Fanta was superior. Look, the drink was made from leftovers of leftovers. It probably didn't taste that good. However, it was popular because other soft drink companies in Germany faced the same problem that Max Keith had previously faced: the trade embargo. This meant that they couldn't produce any soda to even rival Fanta, and instead of creating their own as Max Keith did with Fanta, they simply locked up, went home, and handed over the keys of their companies to the Nazis. So, Fanta had a near monopoly of the market. It wasn't an official monopoly though, it was more like a circumstantial one. When the war ended in 1945, the American heads of Coca-Cola were finally able to contact Max Keith again after losing contact with him for years. He handed over the company to the Americans, and he also handed over the profits of running the company for almost 5 years. This earned him high praise from the corporate heads of Coca-Cola, and he was hailed as a great man. He was even appointed as the head of European Coca-Cola operation. And that's the story of how Max Keith used leftovers of leftovers to bag the biggest promotion of his life. But the story doesn't end there for Fanta. In fact, it was basically just starting. After the war, Coca-Cola actually discontinued the production of Fanta. And why wouldn't they? It was a terribly substandard product and was basically made out of necessity. There was no reason to continue producing it, despite the fact that it had been extremely successful in the market. However, in 1955, Coca-Cola reintroduced Fanta with a new recipe, and this time, it was the orange-flavored drink we all know and love. Apparently, the company didn't want to reinvent the wheel. They took Max Keith's formula, made it better, and added oranges. And that is how Fanta was born. This food brand was sent in by a subscriber. If you want us to make a video about your favorite brand, you can just send it to us. Who knows? The next video may be about your brand. This is Munchable. Hope you enjoyed the video. Munch on!